Okay, so this morning I am here with Kelli Heitstuman-Tomko, and we're going to be talking about her new book, Duplicity in Grove, Idaho. I had to stop and think about that.
Yeah.
What a long name. Good morning, Kelli. Delighted to
Good
have you
morning.
here. Okay, so just to begin starting out with, how did you begin writing?
You know, that was a long time ago, and I've been thinking about that. I remember I was still in public school, so it would have been fourth grade. My parents pulled me out halfway through fourth grade due to a conflict with a teacher who felt that I shouldn't have to listen to mom and dad's rules while I was at school, and told me so. And the next day, I found myself in a private Christian school, and I know that I was writing things in that fourth grade class. Just a few things, a few small things. And then I had an interest for it, but it didn't much, there wasn't much that came of it because I so quickly was changed over to a new school. And they had their format, for my grade group. They didn't have much writing, which seems really odd to me for the grade level, but I didn't do much again until probably about halfway through fifth grade. We changed schools again. They had just taken me out and put me in a convenient school until they could get me into our church school, halfway through the year. And so halfway through fifth grade, I found myself having to write like small accounts, small little things for the curriculum. And I was okay. So I was a problem student. I'm pretty sure when my parents pulled me out of public school, my teacher went down to the teacher's lounge and they broke out a bottle of champagne. I was that much of a problem, and I was that much of a problem in the other schools that I went to as well. So to have one teacher come up and start complimenting something that I was doing was, it's either she must really mean it because they were constantly on my case for good reason. I mean, I deserved it. But then she would come up and say, this is really good. You did a good, and she never asked me if I copied it from someplace else. She never asked me, there was no suggestion that I didn't write it myself. And this is really good. This is a good job. You should write stuff like this more often. And it encouraged me. I loved doing it. I don't always speak well, but I can put anything I want down in writing. And so that I just started writing more stuff. And then because we changed schools, I went from the public school to a Christian school. My entire reading list changed. I was reading books I'd never heard of before. You won't find it on the shelf of any public school library just because these people print it for Christian schools, and that's the books that are on a required reading. And they were I don't want to say, they were safe. Even at that age, I was not a safe reader. I liked things to be exciting in my books. And so then I kind of started getting this idea that, well, if I can write these essays really well, I'll bet I could write these stories better. And so I want to say fifth grade was when I really put my mind to it that I'm going to start writing stuff on my own. And I did. And it was horrible. I had horrible, terrible stories on this thing. And then I hit sixth grade, and then there was all of the poor me, I'm so, abused and neglected poetry, that every teen girl writes. Mm-hmm. And stuff. And then in that case, I had my grandmother encouraging me. She loved the stuff I wrote, as terrible as it was. And so, yeah, I would say fifth grade, and it just kind of blossomed from there.
Right. So then you went into a reporting career after that?
I did. I became a member of the Idaho Writers League when I was in high school, and I had been writing short stories and stuff, but I met someone there who wrote articles. And then I don't know if she was popular nationwide or if it was just in the area. Her name was Dorothy Powers. She wrote columns, and we had her at one of our meetings. One of our I think that year we had the big convention. Our chapter of the Idaho Writers League had the big convention, and we had Dorothy Powers as a guest speaker there. And that just kind of changed everything. It's like, that's the kind of writing I want to do. So I always describe it to people as fiction is my first love, but journalism is my true love. And so it's like, this is what I want to do. I want to do what she's doing, and I have to figure out how to get there. And then life happened. I graduated from high school, and it was 25 years before I did anything journalistic. I went back to school and got my journalism degree, and stuff. Now, during that 25 years, I was still writing. I submitted things at different places. Mostly I just wrote stuff and kept it to myself. It wasn't great writing. You know, I always had relatives going, "Oh, it's such a good story." And I've got one set of stories that I have not published that my mom keeps. "Oh, you need to publish these." And mom, they're crap. That's why I haven't done anything with them. Well, I think they're good stories. No, you're my mom. You're supposed to say that. You know, they're terrible. So, I mean, I still continued to write, and, you know, I got books on writing. I worked on ways to hone the craft. But you know, I was writing because I'm a writer. I need to write. And that was really the only reason I was still writing. And then, yeah, after I got divorced and went back to school, I got my journalism degree and became a cops and courts. That's what they call it, cops and courts reporter. And worked in a little Wyoming town and reported on the amazing amount of crime that you find in a small town.
Small town crime.
Oh my gosh. We had the district court there. So I was sitting at the courthouse all the time, knew the judges, knew the court reporters, knew the clerks, you know. And I loved it. I didn't love my editor. I had a lot of problems with my editor, and I had a lot of problems keeping up with the way journalism is changing. I'm at the scene trying to figure out what witnesses to talk to, and I'm getting in trouble because why didn't you post this on Facebook first? You know, why didn't you let the readers know something's going on and we're going to cover it, and because that's not, you know, I was taught reporting by Pulitzer Prize winning reporters, and not once did they say, well, make sure you get it on Facebook first, you know.
Yeah.
And
you're back, and then make sure it's accurate first.
oh yeah. Oh, it was, and I'm like, I can't do it. So it got to the point where Matt would hate hearing me say it. I got a serious case of writer's block. To help combat it, I went back to my original style of writing. I had a notebook. I was writing a story by hand, like I'd done, you know, 30 years ago and stuff. And every day I noticed I could write less and less. I couldn't. Hang on a second. My phone is there. We go. I couldn't. It got to the point I couldn't. And so I finally went into the editor and I said, you know what, this is not working. I'll leave at the end of the month. You know, as soon as I got all my stories in, you know, I'm out of here. And I went back to Colorado from Wyoming, and I actually did quite a bit of writing for the Greeley Tribune as a freelancer. Quite a bit of reporting, but it took me a good 4 or 5 months to break that writer's block. Before I could actually sit down and not just write something, but nothing was forced finally. And I do miss it to a certain extent. I miss reporting. But I had my chance. I had my go, and I don't want to become a reporter in the fashion that news reporting is done in this day and age. It just,
yeah.
I have no desire to do that.
I understand that one. Okay. So then that brought you back to being a novelist?
It did. And it was my son who kind of really put it out there for me. I was living with a roommate, and I was driving Uber, which I absolutely love. That's my happy place, behind the wheel of my car. Um, and I had to move out of the place I was in. We had problems with black mold that was not getting taken care of. I was sick a lot. And I remember him coming down and sitting down, and we were going to get an apartment together. And he just said, well, I'm really bothered about one thing. And I said, okay, what's that? And he goes, you need to focus more on your writing. I'm just like, where the heck is this coming from? I was doing some freelance articles and stuff, but this was just like this out of the blue thing. And I said, okay, you have to understand, if I'm focusing on my writing, I'm not doing other work that's making me money right now. So you're going to have to pick up some of those bills. And he's like, that's fine. I can do that. Turns out he couldn't, but that wasn't his fault. That was a whole different ball game. You had something else that came up. But so I did. I stopped. I was driving for both Uber and Lyft. So I dropped Lyft and just stuck with Uber. So I wasn't driving as often as I had been. And I was picking up articles for the Greeley Tribune and some of their, so, they print papers for some of the smaller towns as well. So sometimes when they sent me out and said, hey, we've got an assignment for you, it might have been in not Greeley, but the next town over. We want you to do it for this little, or, this little place over here, that type of thing. So, I wasn't doing a lot for them, but I did both the writing and the photography, got the money for that. And then I had at the time kind of started thinking about fiction. I didn't have a writer's group at the time, had a hard time finding one. And I still did NaNoWriMo every year. I started that in 2004 and was doing it every year, whether I finished or not. And I had decided not to do it that year, but I was online talking fairly regularly with Angelique Lamore, who is Louis L'Amour's daughter. And most people who know me really well know that Louis L'Amour is my favorite writer of all time. I have read every single one of his novels more than once. I loved reading about his life the whole bit. So it was really kind of awesome to sit and talk to her. It was more kind of a group setting. We had several people talking to her. And so one day she just said, so I'm going to do Nano this year. Who's with me? And this is 4 days before Nano starts. And I went, yeah, I'll do it. And so she has if you get on her website, she has a free gift, and it is a character for planning out your character. Who is this person? What's their fears? So I printed it up and just started, this person, we're going to do we're going to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And so I sketched together 2 quick characters, had no idea where I was going. I actually got on Nano and went to, in the forums, they have a orphaned plot thing. So you can go through and look at plots, people saying, I was going to do this, and then I decided not to. So it's out there. Go ahead and take it if you want to. And I found one. I can't even tell you what the plot premise is, because it will literally give away the story. I will never write a plot that tight again, because every time somebody said, well, what's your story is about? And I'm like, no, I can't say that. No, I can't say that either. Literally it was that tight. And right about the same time, I found, I was working at Office Depot. I was working in the print shop, and this gentleman comes in to print some stuff up, and he was printing pages of a novel. And it turned out he was the leader of a writing critique group that met at our Barnes and Noble every Tuesday. And so I'm like, really? I'm a writer too. He said, well, you should come down and check us out. So most of my groups had been through Nano, and I was dealing with a lot of young adults, angst, not abused, but like to think they were, because it gave them a reason to be a emotional writer. I'm like, okay, this was my first and last time at this group, and then I tried another one. It's my first and last time at that group. This was a good critique group that I hadn't had since I had been in Idaho with the Idaho Writers League. I mean, it was so good to find a writing group. And so I didn't win Nano that year because I almost immediately got 2 paying gigs for the Greeley Tribune. And so, money comes first. It's like I can't spend all November writing stuff that's not even pay me. And then because I would take a chapter every week and I would go to this critique group and I would read my chapter every week. And they were like, they loved it. Oh my gosh, that is so good. This is a great premise. And I'm like, what's going to happen next? And I'm like, I have no clue. It's like I'm going to go home and figure it out. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I kept telling, I remember talking to my ex-husband at the time, and I said, they are either, just so hungry for something other than their own writing, or I might actually be doing a good job. It's like, because they keep telling me I'm doing this great job. And so that turned into the incident at Grove, Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
I finished it just before I moved out here to Colorado. Literally got the entire, chapter at a time with that group, and then had to leave. So I finished the book, but then I had to leave, and that literally got me started again, back on my fiction road. I came out here. I joined High Sierra, and Michael Grumley, I think that was a July that he was there.
Yes.
And I remember I was going to be looking for a traditional publisher. My leader from my other group was encouraging me, let's start looking at query letters and stuff like that. And we sat, and I remember writing to Michael Grumley afterwards saying, I'm not sure you'll remember who I was. And he goes, I know exactly who you were. You were sitting right in front and you looked like pain. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? He's like, I was wondering if you were going to be okay. And that was the first time so then I ended up going with Amazon Prime, or not Amazon Prime, KDP.
Right.
And that's where I made that choice, was talking to Mike, because that's exactly the type of books I write. He had it all laid out, and I'm just like, I have to change everything I figured I was going to be doing with this writing. And because of that, and then of course he made the comment, if you kill your main character, you're an idiot, keep it so that if you have to, you can come back to a series. And it's like, okay, it literally changed everything. And so now I have a series.
Right.
So
Okay.
So now every August I put up a new book.
Yep. And speaking of book, this is your 6th book in the Johnny Lister series.
It is.
And how did you originally come up with the idea for this character in this series? We'll see how it got to a series, but so let's start.
I was gonna say, she, like I said, I sketched her out very quickly, because like I said, it was literally 4 days. She's like, I'm gonna do Nano, and I'm like, me too. And what the hell are you thinking? You don't have time to do this. You don't even. And so I did. I spent like 2 days of time that I should have been thinking about what I was doing, trying to come up with characters, trying to come up with a plot, because I had 2 days to start writing. And I came up with her mostly because I hate the whole, I'm going through a hard time, so I'm going to make a totally fractured character. I wasn't going through that hard of a time. It's like I was going through a hard time, but it wasn't that hard. But for some reason, her fractured character kind of appealed to me. Johnny's got a lot of problems. Johnny's got a lot of problems with anxiety. She was basically an emotional orphan. She was a savior sibling, meaning she was born to donate bone marrow to an older sibling. Her parents didn't care. Her parents were already divorced by the time she was born. She basically a test tube baby. It was like, we need this kid so this one will live. This one didn't live. So she was just kind of they didn't care. And so she was raised by a grandfather who didn't know she existed. She got abandoned accidentally, but so the police take her to her grandfather, said, we can't get a hold of her parents. Here's your granddaughter. And he's like, who is this? um, and so, so she kind of has that background going on. But at the same time, despite all of her problems, she's solid. I mean, she's grown to a solid person. She's a police officer. She's a state trooper. But the problems still exist. And I liked the idea of a character like that, just basically because there are so many people who have got really, really fractured issues. And like I said, I don't have any problems that bad. I've got, there's some issues going way back, but not that bad. And yet she's still strong enough to actually live life. It's like, yes, this has been a problem, but I'm still standing here and I can still, I can still function and do the job that I love. Her grandfather and her grandfather was a former military police, and then her grandfather's friend, who is a fixture in the books as well, was a state trooper. And so, they encouraged her into police academy and stuff like that. And so she it's kind of the family business, with them all.
Right.
And so she goes back to the little town that she grew up in with her grandfather, and she becomes a state trooper there. And so that's her fixture. That's where she stays. And she loves her town. She loves her people. But yeah, she's got some issues, and she has got an extraordinarily patient husband who is like, okay, we know we've got some issues here. Let's calm down. Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's the beginning of it. And I was wondering why you chose a law enforcement procedural rather than the PI mystery. Is it because of your background?
No, actually. I grew up on private investigators. I mean, I went from Hardy Boys straight to Agatha Christie.
Mm-hmm.
So the private detective thing was just part of my upbringing. As far as reading went. Now, my dad got rid of the television when we were 8, so there wasn't much TV going on, but I do remember Quincy. I was a huge Jack Klugman fan. And I'm trying to remember Chips. We would watch it at my parents' place. And for a while, things were like one of my first stories that I thought I was going to develop into a series. And like I said, they're terrible writing. He was a private detective, but one of the things that I found I liked as I was reading, I read a lot of true crime. I watch a lot of true crime. In fact, once in a while when I'm like, yeah, I'm not getting anywhere with a story idea, I need to sit down and watch some murder shows. And, and I'll go in and sit down and watch them. And one of the things, I married a court stenographer. And so all of a sudden I've got a very solid understanding of how everything works. I was his, unofficial secretary, calling people, finding out how you spell names, finding out who this officer, just collecting all of the information so he could do this. And I started to understand the position of the police officer to the prosecutor, to the judge, to the lawyers, to the, and how everybody blames the police for everything. Well, the police let them go. No, the police didn't let them go. The police are usually as unhappy as you are about this guy being let go. It's not the police that did it. It's the DA, and the DA did it for a specific reason, and so I started seeing all of those things put together. A private detective can do things that literally would get him arrested in some cases. There's a lot of breaking and entry going on. There's a lot of, stuff like that. And they can collect any information that they want pertaining to their case, sometimes through not necessarily the right methods. But a cop can't do that, because the minute a cop does that, you've got a technicality. You've got a lawyer sitting there saying, out goes the case. Now we have to start this whole thing over again. And this piece of evidence can't be used because that person screwed it up. And so I like that tight. I'm not a person who keeps rules very well, but I like the tight confines of those rules, where And she'll tell her troopers, in an investigation constantly. Ed Ramsey is the DA in the books, and she's constantly saying, Ed is going to want more than that. You need to get more than that because Ed is not going to let this fly. You have to have more than that. And I think one of the shows, fictional shows that I liked the best was the Law and Order shows, because they do so well showing you that relationship between the police and the DA. And, they're constantly harassing Alex, but we need a warrant. She's like, nope, you're not getting one until you can prove this, this, and this, and this. And most people don't understand that that's actually how it works in the court system. The police have to go out and they have to be able to prove this. You can't just, okay, we arrested you, we threw you in jail, and you're going to court. No, there's a couple of lawyers, there's a couple of procedures, there's a lot more going on before a case gets solved.
Yeah,
but
they watch CSI, and see a whole different picture.
Yeah, it's like they have to. There has to be stuff that they have to stick to, and they don't have the freedom of a private investigator to go around and say, I'm going to get my information through this method. It might be slightly off kilter, but as long as I don't get caught, I'm good. and you can't do that as a cop. And so I like the tight confines of that, because I think in a lot of ways it forces more real investigation. You can't rely on just the science anymore. It's like, here, we're going to find this out. We're going to throw it over to the forensics. They're going to solve everything for us, and we're done. It's like, no. You've got this. It says the possibility of this, but you need to do more looking. You need to do more investigating, but you have to follow the rules while you do it.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about Grove, Idaho. Is it a real place, or is that purely imaginary?
That is thoroughly imaginary. Between Bonners Ferry and the border, there is pretty much nothing except this one little town called Good Grief, Idaho, and they actually have a sign out front with Charlie Brown and Snoopy on it. We used to pass it just before we got to Eastport at the border. It's all national forest land up there. There's a little bit of farmland. If you head a little bit to the west, you'll hit Priest River and the Mount Schweitzer, the ski mountains out there. And if you head just a little bit to the east, you're going to hit Montana, because it's right in the Panhandle. It's a very narrow area, and it's all Knicksu National Forest. There's nothing else out there. so basically, what I did was I got on Google Earth and I kind of looked for a big patch that looked like nothing. It's probably farmland, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's about 12 miles up from Bonners Ferry, and I'm like, that's Grove right there. so there's no actual, and part of it that got me thinking about it was when I was in Colorado, I was notorious for getting lost, because it was like, oh, I've never been down this road before. And I did that once, and I was in the Pike National Forest, and all of a sudden, in the middle of all this national forest, there's this little tiny town with a little store and a little, and I mean, there wasn't much there, but I there wasn't even cell service there, so I had to get out and actually pull my map out to figure out where I was and where I was going. But it was in the middle of the national forest. I mean, there was like people lived in a couple of these little houses, and they had this little store, and and tourists would come by and get stuff from the store, but people actually lived there. And so when I was thinking of putting something up in that area, that little place in the Pike National Forest was the first thing that came to mind. It's like, it's all national forest land, but somebody's actually living there. and so that's kind of what Grove came about. It was, before it became national forest, you've got people who live up there, and that land is technically still theirs. And so I just created a little town and dropped it in the middle of nowhere in the Idaho Panhandle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Your new book is kind of based on mistaken identity. What can you tell us about your new book without revealing the plot?
So the mistaken identity is actually a plot device. And yes, in the book, you're going to find people who are not who they say they are. But what happens at the beginning of the book, and it's on the blurb, so I don't, it doesn't bother me to say anything, is Johnny gets kidnapped. And it turns out they're looking for someone else. They're not looking for Johnny Lister. They're looking for John E. Lester. But the woman who kidnaps her has got a very heavy Southern accent. And of course, you go to Grove and you say Johnny Lester in any accent, they're going to automatically think, oh, you're talking about Johnny. She's up there at the police station, So they mistakenly grab her instead of now when she gets rescued, she's thinking, I live in a town of 600 people, and they're saying that this John E. Lester person lives there, and there is no way that I could possibly not know that there is a person in my town that has a name that close to my own. So she's actually on a medical leave, but she kind of bullies her superiors into, look, I know I can't look into this. She can't investigate her own kidnapping. She can't, do all this. Let me at least find out who this person is, because there's no way that a person with that name lived in this town, and this is how I found out about it. It's like there's no way that happened.
Yeah.
So they agreed to let her look, and because she's looking, that kind of sets events in motion that she didn't see coming. She's looking for this person, and all of a sudden things start happening over here. So the people who kidnapped her have nothing to do with what's going on in town, but what's going on in town would never have happened if they hadn't kidnapped her. It was kind of like the key that unlocked the door. So yeah, she was mistaken for someone else, and as she goes and looks for that person, who is this person, that sets some things in motion. And so then the next thing she knows, she's dealing with some murders in her town that is like out of nowhere. What is going on? Why did this happen, type thing. And so yeah, the mistaken identity, it was her mistaken identity. But of course, as she's going on, most of her cases are people from out of town. It's a small area close to the Canadian border, close to Schweitzer, so during the summer and during part of the winter, her town swells. It gets like any tourist town. And so most of the crime she's dealing with transient, issues. These are people going to they're only staying for a couple of weeks, or they're here to ski, or they're here to, in this case, these are her own people. This is probably the first case where I've written where these are her own people. Now, all of a sudden, she's got people that she's known or been familiar with, even if she doesn't know them personally. They're in her town. She knows who they are for 14 and 15 years. And all of a sudden, these are not the people she thought they were, or they're not the people anybody thought they were. It's like, so all of a sudden you've got somebody who is not who they were. However, the whole reason the whole thing started is because somebody mistook her name for somebody else's and kidnapped her. And she was the wrong person and stuff. And so that's how it starts. It's the device that starts the whole schmeal, the whole situation.
I finished reading that book, and I was really impressed with the changes and the different twists in it. I said, this is great. This is really a great book. I really was enjoying it. And
I always try to, the first book I threw and I don't even know why I did it, but it's become a thing for me. I threw one thing in there that was so unexpected. And so then when I was sat to write the second book, I'm like, I don't want it to be contrived, but I want something completely unexpected. I want all of a sudden you to go, whoa, and so each book I've been trying to find something. How can I throw that whoa factor in there, that thing you never saw coming? And one of the ones is like literally on the first page of the book, where my sister called and said she hated me and called me names a couple of times, and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, I'm reading the first chapter of your book. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I totally get it. And so I've tried to do that in every book, but it gets harder and harder because I want it to fit the story. I don't want it to feel contrived, but at the same time, it's like, how many times can I accidentally strike gold? How many times can I accidentally get that? Oh, this is perfect. It'll fit right into the story before I run out of whoa factor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Once you set yourself up, you got to keep doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I've got a couple more questions. Can this book be read as a standalone, do you think, or do you really need to know the rest of the series?
No, I think as far as the main story, the mystery story, the main plot of the story can be read, alone. It's not tied to anything else that's happened in any of the other books. However, I don't necessarily introduce every character, in each new book. When Winston comes in to talk to her, if you've read the other books, you know who Winston is, you know who his parents are, you know what he does in town. I'm not going to, on the sixth book, say Winston, who is da 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 da. I'll say Leland. When Leland shows up, when she sees him in the hospital, and she makes the comment, why am I not surprised, that you would show up? And he makes the comment, well, I'm a spy. It's what I do. That's the most introduction I give to him. But anybody who has read the other books understand he works for the CIA. But I'm not going to sit there and say, no, it did come up when she's talking to one of the cops. He's like, I've never worked on a case with the CIA before. So that, okay, he works for the CIA. But I'm not going to just open the book with, and there stood Leland, who worked for the CIA. It's like, she knows who he is. She can't, and because it's first person, anything that's being said is her saying it, so she's not gonna be, so if you read the from the beginning, you're going to understand the relationships of the people in the book. But as far as the story itself goes, no, I think I think it's, you can read it, if you come into the series in the middle of the series, the book is going to make sense. It's not going to be one of those things where, I have no idea what's going on here. It's like, it's the story. It's the beginning of the story starts at the beginning of the story and it ends at the end of the story. And there's no, well, this is because of this that happened, 4 books ago. It's actually just the story itself, the plot itself is a standalone plot.
They're pretty self-contained, in other words, so that nothing is carrying through from a previous one other than characters.
Right, exactly. The characters and the relationships carry through, but the stories are solid. One, that story. Right.
So where can your future readers find your book?
So I do sell them on Amazon. They are on. I've got the Amazon page, but I've also got an Aces of Nevada page as well. So I'm on Aces, and I sell them at the craft fairs. I sell the first. Well, what I've done this time is I've got the first 3 books plus the Winston companion, the novella, and I sell them separately, or you can buy the whole thing for $20. So I've actually, as I've been going through looking at reviews and stuff, I've come across 1 or 2 reviews of people who actually picked the books up at the craft fairs and are reading them. And it's like, oh, yay! It's like, and they love to review. I can't even get my family to leave reviews. This is great.
Okay, so all your sales, if they have to go out somewhere, they can find them at Amazon.com.
Yeah, Amazon, absolutely.
Okay. So, anything else you want to say today?
I don't know. I enjoy the writing. I enjoyed this story. I'm wanting to break out a little bit and do some other stuff, but I don't think I will ever do that. I don't think I'll do it until I'm done with Johnny. And as long as I can sit down and say, what is she going to be up to this time? And I have a story, it's going to continue. I'm going to still be writing her.
Right. I was thinking that as you go along, when you're going to do something like this, you have to really love your character. So.
And I like it because they understand each other. They by the time you get to the sixth book, you know exactly how this person is going to react to this. There's no, I don't want to say there's no development of the character, because that's not true. They continue to grow as well. But they're easier to write because you know them.
Yeah. I guess you don't really see a big story arc through it for the character, because they're doing what they do all the time. But there are things that they do grow, just like you do in real life.
Yeah, it's like, Dan is always going to be there running the resort. She's always going to be, the cop. They've got the kids. They've got the, they've got these people, and it's always going to be, I've had to. When I first started, it was just her she had a substation in the ranger station, because the Rangers in Idaho are actually a subdivision of the Idaho State Police.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was it's a little town. I mean, that's all they need. The Rangers go out and take care of rangery stuff. And if there needs to be investigation, she's a trained trooper, but I did see that, we're going to have to get a little bigger, because there's only so much you can do in a town with 600 people before you start running out of, stories and crimes or time. It's like, she's one person, she's how much can she possibly do? And then, of course, as I've pointed out in the books, you've got the thing of jurisdiction. The sheriff can't go up there and do the job for her. He does not have jurisdiction in the national forest because he's a county sheriff, and stuff. And so, it got to the point where, okay, Kelly, you're going to have to start making the town grow a little bit, whether you like it or not, and you're going to have to give her some troopers to work with, or she doesn't sleep, it's like,
Right.
It's like, no matter what and I think the fourth one, I think that kind of became evident, where she just constantly is getting called. She can't even sit down and have dinner. It's like, oh, we got another, so off she goes. And it's like, no, you need more troopers. It's like, you need to bring more people in. So yeah, it's been, but yeah, as long as I can come up with a story, and I don't find myself repeating myself and tripping over myself, going, we already did that, we need to do something else. Yeah, I'll keep going with her and and see where it goes. But so far, she seems to be working.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And if you want to find Kelli's book, you can find it out on Amazon. I recommend it. It's a good book. You'll really enjoy it. And we'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Bye-bye.